Hello and welcome to the B7 Quickfire question quiz. Only 30 questions today, 20 of those are for all students and an extra 10 for the triple students. So let's get started. Question 1, how would we describe a community where all the species and environmental factors are in balance? So there may be some fluctuations in the numbers of the different species living there, but generally speaking, there aren't any major changes. How would you describe that community? And the answer is a stable community. Okay, question 2. What do we call a number of individuals of the same species? What do we call a number of individuals of the same species? Tricky one here. Popular as a multiple choice on the foundation paper, and it's population. Okay, we tend to talk about our local community. Okay, the community that we live in. Really, the word community in a biological sense is discussing everything that's living in that area. So we'd be including all the pets, the dogs, the cats, the birds, everything that lives in that area. Whereas if we think about the human population, that helps us to realise that individuals of the same species is referred to as a population. Question 3. What is another name for the top predator? So the final part of the food chain that doesn't have any predators. What would we call that? The answer is the apex predator. Okay, the apex predator. Question 4. Abiotic factors are non-living factors which can affect a community. What are examples of abiotic factors? Now there are 7. Okay, so I'm going to give you some time. You might decide just to go for 2 or 3, and that's fine. You might decide to try and pause it and think about what all 7 are. They are the non-living factors. Okay, let's put some answers up. So first of all, light intensity. Plants obviously needing a good light intensity. Temperature affects plants and animals. Moisture levels, so rainfall. pH and mineral content affecting plants, so soil pH there. Wind intensity and direction. Carbon dioxide levels for plants. And if we're looking at aquatic animals, for example fish, then oxygen levels in the water. Okay, so quite a few there. I'll leave that there just for a second. Okay, question 5. What is the surface area to volume ratio like for a desert fox? So desert fox lives in hot conditions. Okay, they have a large surface area to volume ratio or a small surface area to volume ratio. Quite an important one. The exam board really like talking about surface area to volume ratio. And the answer is large surface area. So they've got the big ears, they've got the long tail to try and lose as much heat as possible. Question 6. What might the root system of a cactus be like? What might the root system of a cactus be like? And the answer is it could be deep roots to get the water deep under the ground, and it also widespread shallow roots so that when it rains they collect as much water as possible. And you notice that you never see cacti close together. They're always quite spread apart because they've got that widespread shallow root system. Question 7. What do we call an animal that eats meat and vegetables? What do we call an animal that eats meat and vegetables? And the answer is, of course, an omnivore. So we've got herbivore, carnivore and omnivore. Question 8. What do we call the cyclical nature of predator-prey relationships? What we're talking about here is cycles. Okay, so we might have, in class we did the ladybird and the greenfly, and as the greenfly population went up they provided more food for the ladybirds, so shortly afterwards their populations went up, and then because there were so many ladybirds the greenfly dropped down, their numbers decreased because they were all being eaten, and then that provided less food for the ladybirds, so then their populations went down, and we call this a cycle of events. It's quite a predictable cycle. We drew a graph of that in class. What's that cycle of predator-prey relationship called? And the answer is succession. Tricky one to remember, that one. It is succession because it happens successively. Question 9. How would you randomly place a quadrat in quadrat sampling? Now, recently we've talked about how throwing it like a frisbee isn't always accepted on the mark scheme. So what would be a better way to randomly place a quadrat? And the answer is by rolling a dice, walking that many paces, then placing the quadrat. Okay, question 10. How do you place quadrats on a line transect? So we talked about a line transect being used over a varying area, so a different area from one side to the other. Could be down a beach, could be from in the shade underneath some trees out into the sunshine. But how do we place the quadrats on a line transect? We have to consider how long the transect line is. Could be 100 metres long, could be 10 metres long. That's going to affect where we place them. But regardless of the length of the line transect, we always place them, let's have a look at the answer, at regular intervals along the line. So every 2 metres, every 5 metres, every 10 metres, depending on how long that transect line is. Obviously, if we've got a transect line that's 100 metres long, we're probably not going to place our quadrat every 2 metres because we'd be there for a very long time collecting our data. Question 11. In the carbon cycle, what process takes carbon out of the atmosphere? In the carbon cycle, what process takes carbon out of the atmosphere? It sounds a bit more complicated than it really is. If we think about carbon dioxide, that's the form that carbon takes in the atmosphere. What takes carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere? And the answer is, of course, photosynthesis. Question 12. In the carbon cycle, how does decay release carbon into the atmosphere? Okay, so we've got some dead plant or animal material and it's going to be decayed, usually by bacteria. Okay, how does that release carbon into the atmosphere? And the answer is because the bacteria are respiring. So the respiring bacteria feed on the dead plant and animal material and in doing so release carbon dioxide. Question 13. What do we call the variety of different species living in an area? What do we call the variety of different species living in an area? So if we've got a lot of different things living in one particular place, what would we say about that place? Okay, the answer is that it's very biodiverse. Okay, so bio we seem to chuck in front of lots of things in this topic, just to remind ourselves we're in biology and that it's biological things that we're discussing, and we would say that there is a high biodiversity, or it is very biodiverse. Question 14. What is the build-up of toxic chemicals in a food chain called? So there might have been a toxic spill into a river and no one's really that worried because it's a very low concentration. They don't think it's going to cause much damage, but as that goes through the food chain, it kind of escalates, it builds up. What do we call that build up of toxic chemicals? And the answer is bioaccumulation. There's that word in front again, the bio, and it's accumulated, it's built up through the food chain, so we call it bioaccumulation. Question 15. What is the drawback of the destruction of peat bogs? I've put this in deliberately. A few of these questions I've put in because they're the ones that kind of catch us out. So peat bogs are where trees have died and fallen into the ground, where it's quite boggy, and they rot down and become peat, which we can turn into compost or use as compost. And what's been happening is people have been destroying the peat bogs by burning the peat to clear it so that they can build on that area. So what's bad about the destruction of those peat bogs? And the answer is the release of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So again, part of the carbon cycle, not very useful, greenhouse gas, impacting global temperature change. Question 16. What is a major reason for deforestation? What is a major reason for deforestation? There are so many different answers you can give here. The trick is to not be too vague with it. If you just say for money, it's not being that detailed with the explanation. You want to say, or cutting down the trees to use the wood to make money, for example. Okay, let's see what other answers we can come up with. Okay, and the answer is growing sugarcane to make bioethanol. We talked about this. We said that sometimes not only is land changing from being growing crops to growing sugarcane, because there is a lot more money to be gained from growing sugarcane to make bioethanol, but also clearing vast areas of forest to grow sugarcane. We also saw on the video in class about growing the trees for palm oil, and the devastation that was causing to the orangutans. We've got crops and for farming animals, but also it depends really kind of which location you're thinking about for the reasons for deforestation. For here in our country, it might be more to do with building, so clearing an area of land to build some houses. We're running out of space to build properties, so that could be a major reason for it, rather than the economics of food or sugarcane. Okay. Question 17. Why has there been an increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere as population size has increased? Again, lots of possible answers. Why has there been an increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere as population size has increased? Okay, the answer is more cars, because there's more people. More people means more respiration, releasing carbon dioxide. More use of fossil fuels, for example, heating, electricity, and also more deforestation, as kind of links to the previous question there about clearing that space to build houses, etc. Question 18. What can zoos do to increase biodiversity? What can zoos do to increase biodiversity? So what's the main kind of functional use of a zoo rather than just going to see the animals? And the answer is, of course, breeding programs. So there are records of all the animals in zoos across the world, and animals can be borrowed from different zoos for breeding programs, checking that they're not closely related. And then if successful, some of those breeding programs actually lead to animals being released into the wild, and also building those populations of endangered species. Question 19. What are the areas of land around fields that allow for runoff, should have put an extra F in there, chemicals called? Okay. What are those areas called? So if you walk kind of through a field, you probably walk down the edge by the hedgerow, and there's an area of land there, probably about 5 metres, that they don't grow any crops on, they don't put any chemicals on, and it's all the way around the edge, and it means that if they spray chemicals onto the land and then it rains, that's like a runoff zone. Okay, and it's called field margins. It's the margin, it's the edge of the field. Okay, last question for everyone, for the double scientists, and then we'll go on to the triple questions. In the water cycle, what comes after condensation? In the water cycle, what comes after condensation? And the answer is obviously the water condenses into the rain clouds and then precipitation occurs. So thanks very much if you are a combined double science student. I hope you enjoyed that. And let's move on to the next 10 questions for the triple science. So what is put into the anaerobic digester to be broken down by bacteria? What is put into the anaerobic digester to be broken down by bacteria? And the answer is organic material. Anything that can decay, so this is our grass cuttings, food waste, plant material, anything like that can be broken down by the bacteria, and we call that organic material. Question 22. What is put into the anaerobic anything can be decomposed. Right, I won't read the same question again. Let's go to 22. What are the two products removed from the anaerobic digester? So what are the two things made by the bacteria in the anaerobic digester? Okay, first of all, the purpose of it is biogas, and the other byproduct is slurry, which is made into compost. So we've got that floating lid that rises as the gas is being produced. That can be used for our heating systems. We can use it for our Bunsen burners in the lab. Slurry is the kind of decayed material made into compost. Question 23. Why is it important that the anaerobic digester is set up as a continuous process? In other words, once it's set up, we just keep feeding in material, keep removing material. We'd never stop it, clean it and start again. So a key clue here is the fact that it's an anaerobic digester. Okay, so the answer is when it's first set up, there is oxygen present in the digester. It takes about 5 days for the bacteria to use up all that oxygen in aerobic respiration, and then they switch to anaerobic respiration, which is where we get the biogas. So it's kind of a bit of wasted time at the beginning of the setup because the oxygen is present. Question 24. What is an indicator species of sulphur dioxide in the air? What is an indicator species of sulphur dioxide in the air? So we know that there's sulphur compounds found in our fossil fuels when we're using our cars. Some of those sulphur compounds burn to become sulphur dioxide. That mixes with rainwater, becomes acid rain. But there's an indicator species usually found on brickwork or trees. And if we have lots of it present, then we say that there's not much sulphur dioxide in the air. If they start disappearing, maybe a road's being built and they start dying off, then we would say there's a lot of sulphur dioxide in the air. And the answer is lichens. Okay, so they don't like the sulphur dioxide, they like clean air because they're liking it. See what I did there? Question 25. What are the 3 causes of energy loss in a pyramid of biomass? What are the 3 causes of energy lost in a pyramid of biomass? Okay, so we see the pyramid of biomass. There's those sections kind of as it steps up where it gets narrower, and we've got loss on either side there. One reason could be that the energy has been used by the previous organisms, so respiration, movement, maintaining body temperature, all of those things use energy. 2 is it's lost in the feces. And 3, not all the organism is eaten. So bones, fur, tree roots, all those kind of things. Question 26. What are the advantages of intensive farming of animals? So we might not agree with intensively farming animals, but what's an advantage of intensively farming them? So we saw the pigs, we saw the chickens. Again, quite a few answers here. They claimed on the videos we watched that by keeping them in small pens, they were able to deliver exactly the right amount of food, deliver the medication to them, which they claimed were good reasons for doing that. But our answer is less energy is used in movement or maintaining body temperature, so therefore more energy goes into growth. So basically we get more product and of course then more profit. Question 27. What methods are used in sustainable fishing? Now I really would urge you to watch an episode of Deadliest Catch, because they bring in with every episode, without realising it, everything we need to know about sustainable fishing. Again, lots of answers possible here. Good to always give as many as you can in an exam question. Okay, the answers. Net size. Okay, so they might have nets with some gaps in so that the juveniles can get out. Alternative methods, so line fishing. Below size are thrown back. Fishing quotas, so you stop fishing when you hit the quota, maybe when your boat's full. You have to have a licence, so you can't just have anyone go out there. Fishing season, so you have a particular time slot. And then banned areas where you're not allowed to fish, where they're allowing fish stocks to regenerate. Question 28. Why is it useful to make mycoprotein instead of farming cattle? So mycoprotein, we know it as the brand name corn. You probably wouldn't write on your shopping list mycoprotein, you'd probably write corn or veggie sausages or something like that. Why is it useful to make that instead of farming cattle? Again, a whole host of different answers here. Let's look at those answers. So, suitable for vegetarians, quick production for a growing population. A lot of this topic was about the fact that we've got this growing population and what are we doing to kind of combat that. Okay, so it only takes about 6 weeks to produce. Reduces the length of the food chain, it's more energy efficient, it's high in protein, low in fat, and if we're not farming cattle, there's less methane going into the atmosphere, which again is a greenhouse gas. Okay, question 29. What is the name of the fungi used to make mycoprotein? What is the name of the fungi used to make mycoprotein? It always seems to be worth 1 mark, especially in a 6 marker or a 3 or a 4 marker. So it's useful to try and remember it. And the answer is Fusarium, the fungi Fusarium. And our final question of this B7 quickfire question quiz is, nice easy one, is the production of mycoprotein a batch or continuous process? We've already seen the anaerobic digester, that was a continuous process. This one is making food, it's making mycoprotein, batch or continuous. And the answer, of course, is batch. Takes about 6 weeks. And the idea being that we need to clean out the equipment. If we kept continually adding stuff and then trying to drain off all the mycoprotein, there might be some stuff left in there for a long period of time. Probably wouldn't be too hygienic. So it takes 6 weeks, and then they probably have lots of these set up and all started at different times so they can still get product every day. But actually the process itself is a batch process. Okay. So that takes us to the end of the B7 Quickfire question quiz. If you would like to subscribe, I would really appreciate that. If you enjoyed the video, then you will find out about more videos to come, and there'll be a lot more revision videos coming over the next few weeks. Have a great time, enjoy the summer, thank you.